My name is Yosef Haim. I came to enter the Jewish people and had my own personal Matan Torah on Kaf Beit Shabbat, the 7th of February of this year. And I just want to basically start by reading from a letter, one of the first letters I wrote to the London Beit Din. And I feel that this letter fully encapsulates everything I was going through at the time of wanting to convert, and it puts really all my emotions and just shows exactly where I was at the time and what led me to convert. So with your permission, I'll read this to you, and B'ezras Hashem, I hope this will be great chizuk to us all. So, dear Rabbi of the London Beit Din Conversion Division, I am writing to you in relation to my desire to convert to Judaism. I have had a growing interest in Judaism for many years, and having given a lot of thought and study, I feel that I cannot go on without seeking conversion and living a Jewish life, observing the precepts, the mitzvot outlined in the Holy Torah. I am currently 23 years old and I work full-time as a civil servant. I was born and brought up in Hinduism, but I did not find the truth in a religion with so many gods and varying and often contradictory belief systems, which are largely based on superstition. I looked into many other religions and spiritual practices, including Christianity, Islam and Buddhism, for truth and inner fulfillment, but I was met with contradictions in their belief systems and a deep inner sense that they weren't true, or they did not lead me to serve God in the right way. Ever since I learned about Judaism and the Torah at school, a fascination has remained in my mind about the traditions, ritual and laws of Judaism. I have read many articles on Judaism and Jewish history, and I read many rabbinical writings such as the Pirkei Avot of the Mishnah, Rambam, Path of the Just, Duties of the Heart, and the Gemara. And I read these on a daily basis. The Jewish scriptures resonate with me, and I'm amazed by the truth and depths of Torah. I've found that Judaism is truly the only rational religion and life path out of any of the existing world religions. The written and oral Torah is full of knowledge which is can be scientifically verified and proves that it really is a divinely inspired text bestowed to mankind from the creator of the world himself. Furthermore, I understand that Judaism is a way of life that is based on national revelation. The giving of the Torah to the Israelites was a situation where there would have been no logical reason for a nation of 3 million people to accept upon themselves and commit to practice all these 613 precepts unless they experienced the Creator himself speaking to them directly, and unless the Torah was an accurate record of what they themselves had experienced. I currently observe to the best of my ability the Noahide laws, which I have researched thoroughly. I can now also read and pronounce Hebrew very well due to my years of study and reading tefillot from the Siddur on a daily basis, reading Tehillim, which I find very moving. I'm also performing many additional mitzvot to the 7, which I'm obliged to keep, such as giving charity, washing my hands on waking up, praying shacharit on a daily basis, and observing kosher laws. I have been attending Central Synagogue in London for Shabbat and for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur services. Also, I've spoken with the rabbi of this synagogue concerning my desire to convert, and he has kindly explained the lengthy process. I feel a strong yearning to perform the mitzvot, and I understand that they are very important in the eyes of God. I am drawn to want to be in a Torah-observing community and dwell among the children of Hashem. I feel that every part of the culture and practice of Judaism leads to an ethical and moral way of life, and although I know that I will be told that I can live an ethical and moral way of life as a non-Jew, I simply cannot accept that way of life, since our culture and society today has fallen to very low levels of immorality and immodesty. I cannot conceive how I can continue to live life as a non-Jew and at the same time fear Hashem and observe monotheism to the extent that I currently do, when my entire social circle are so steeped in ungodly trivialities and my family ask me and expect me to observe idolatrous practices. With the help of the London Beit Din, I would like to start the process towards converting and accept upon myself the yoke of the kingdom of heaven, Ol Malchut Shamayim. And this, in the spirit of Ruth, go to where you go, dwell to where you dwell, and make your people my people, and serve your God as my God, may be his will, yours sincerely. So, maybe I should explain further some points in the letter, just to clarify and elaborate. I explained at the beginning that I was born brought up in Hinduism. My family were not so strictly observant, but they were more secular and traditional in their observance of this religion. But I was always drawn to, as a young child, to question the big questions about who is God and what is there life after death, and what happens after one dies, what God looks like. And I remember asking my father these questions like, what does God eat, and what do we believe God looks like, and things like that. And so the answers he would give were sometimes very funny. He would actually, in the end, I came to the conclusion that God was a vegetarian blue man. But this is obviously I accepted it until a certain age, and I thought this can't be right, because it didn't make sense. And as I grew up in this faith, I would ask the teachers of that religion, people that I knew, gurus and various other teachers, what the beliefs were, and often the answers they would give were contradicting one another, and not to mention that there's a big problem with the fact that there's many gods in that religion. So which one is the real one, and which one's more powerful than the other? So that a lot of it, as I grew up, didn't answer my questions and didn't fulfill me inwardly, and so I did seek other paths and other spiritual systems. I was actually brought up, and the school I went to was a Christian school in the southeast of England, and the school obviously made us read the Bible and would teach us various Christian ideas. So I started to discover a lot about this religion, and again I had no exposure to the Bible before, and my first exposure to it was really about what they would call the New Testament, which is the story of JC. I won't mention his name as we're in a holy place. So I started to like this story that there was that God had decided to choose his son to sacrifice himself and whatever they believe, for the salvation of mankind. And the story began to make sense to me, and I really was not exposed to what we call the Old Testament, which is really our Tanakh. I was just accepting a religion which was very similar to Hinduism, because it also believes in the incarnation of a God. And in fact, if you look at the history of Christianity, it really is just paganism of the Roman Empire that was replaced with various Christian or Jewish ideas. So really it was exactly the same type of religion. They believed that that the main figure was born on December the 25th in a manger. The same story exists in other cultures. In Hinduism it exists, and in Buddhism, and in and in ancient Egyptian culture. So it really is a pagan idea when you look at it, which has just been copied and replaced with other ideas. So this was basically what I discovered in my growing up. I also want to point out about Christianity, since the title of this lecture is about Christianity, so I just want to explain something. So Christianity is really, I came to the conclusion anyway, that Christianity really is a false religion, and it is flawed because many of the claims it makes are contradictory to the Old Testament. Actually, when I started to become exposed to what they call the Old Testament, what we call the Tanakh, I found that the Tanakh was so much more rich, interesting, and it led me to want to seek more. I started to believe that there was only one God, and that this God had to have created the world. But I myself was beginning to find the contradictions in the Old and the New Testaments, that they had sort of stuck together. So they believe that the main figure is the Messiah, and they try to prove this on the very beginning of the text by giving a lineage of the figure all the way from Adam Arishon all the way to his father Joseph. I started to follow other religions or faiths, so I looked into Islam, but Islam is very much similar, because again everything that it takes is from number one, either the Torah or the traditions of Judaism, and also Christianity, and mixes it together. I guess the main thing that is interesting about these other two religions is that they all have one thing in common, which is that they accept that the Torah is true. They accept that Zman Matan Torah was a real thing. They don't, it's very interesting that if they're trying to make a new religion, they don't say, well, that one's wrong, and make up a new religion. They base everything on the fact that the Torah was given to the Jews. They don't deny that. So, this indicates, I think, quite clearly that that Zman Matan Torah was a true event, because to them, to deny that Matan Torah and the Jews received the Torah wasn't true, or didn't happen, or wasn't a real event, would be like us denying that 9/11 didn't happen. Matan Torah was a real event. It really happened, and really, I mean, I sort of came across a lecture during my search, which kind of led me mainly to come to Judaism, and this lecture was about why the giving of the Torah is the only verifiable true event of history, because the thing with Judaism and the way that the Torah was given is that it was a national revelation, a revelation of God to 3 million people, cannot be denied by the Jewish people or their descendants. Every other religion begins with one person having a private revelation on their own, whether it's Muhammad on a mountain, or Mary having a dream that she was going to give birth miraculously or whatever. These are private revelations, and anyone can make up a private revelation and make up a religion overnight and get followers, and this happens all the time. In fact, when I was living with my mother in Surrey, I came across a group of Mormons. They call themselves Mormons. They're a type of Christianity which only started in the late 18th century or early 19th century. And their religion is based on a revelation which supposedly a man called Joseph Smith got in America, where he was supposedly visited by an angel and given a new set of scriptures in addition to the New Testament. So it's like an addition to Christianity. And so that's an example of a religion that can be, made literally overnight. And when I was talking to these people, I learned a lot, and I would say my involvement with these Mormons is mainly what got me to look into the Torah and to understand why the Judaism really is the only true religion that can exist. In addition to that, the event of Matan Torah, I mentioned in my letter that there's no logical reason that this nation of Jews, of Israelites that left Egypt, would suddenly accept upon themselves 630 mitzvot. If you look at these mitzvot, some of them are very, you could understand if someone made up a religion and the commandments that were commanded in this religion were easy to follow, like eat pancakes every Wednesday or something very simple to follow. But the Torah is demanding a lot from people. It actually demands to keep Shabbat and to keep kashrut and to observe very rigid marriage laws, and kashrut and Sukkot and various other things. So it immediately brings to your mind the question of how did these people accept such a law, and if you look, it's quite obvious that the Torah, when it was given, it explained and it described what the Jews were going through, like up to that point. So it says the Jews were saved from Egypt, the sea split, manna fell from heaven, they were being fed, from Hashem, and all these many miracles were happening. And then on the day of Shavuot, they received the Torah, and inside the Torah, when they read it, they see that it explains everything they went through. So that's clearly, evident, because if the people, let's say, open the Torah and none of those things happened that is described in it, then quite obviously they would reject it. Like right now, if I told you that I had a revelation of a new religion and you were all taken from, I helped you, all escape China and come here, and many miracles happened. We flew in the air, and our clothes never wore out for 40 years. And then and you read this in the book, and I'm telling you that you have to now accept this Torah. None of this ever happened. You would obviously put me into a mental home and say, you're sorry, I'm not interested in what you're telling me. But the children of Israel accepted the Torah. That's a fact, because today we have Jews, and everyone's still keeping all the mitzvot. So very clearly, this event had to, and everything written in the Torah has to be real. It has to have really been what they experienced. So right there, we can quite logically, if you use a little bit of seichel, you can actually prove right there that the Torah really is a true document and it's real. And the one that gave it is true, is the creator of the world. So I mentioned that I learned about Judaism at school. Our school was a public school. We were taught about world religions. And in that, in one of the classes, we were actually shown the Shema, the main prayer of the Jews. Shema Israel, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, on a board, on a sort of a white broad projector. And the writing was all in Hebrew, and it was transliterated underneath. And the teacher actually got us to recite Shema Israel, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And we all said it. The whole class said it, and it resonated with me when I recited this again, and I saw it, and I saw the letters, and everything about it was just so beautiful and mesmerizing, and the Hebrew alphabet itself became something which I began to love, and I started to learn and teach myself. So I remember staying behind on that class because it was the last class of the day, and I wrote in my book, at the back of my book, in the Hebrew, I transcribed it, Shin, Mem, Ayin, and so on, and I took upon myself to learn Hebrew from then on, because I said this is such a beautiful language. And so that's basically how I learned Hebrew. I was about 14 at the time. So this is how I taught myself Hebrew, and this is why, Baruch Hashem, I can read Hebrew very well now, and it's really helped me so much in my conversion. I also mentioned, the Torah is true. I mentioned that the culture that I was immersed in was a culture of immorality, modesty, choshech, vanities, and this really is the culture of the goyim and the state of the world outside. It really is a place of degradation, and it's becoming ever more so. And the things which used to fulfill me in that lifestyle that I was living before weren't fulfilling me anymore, and I was deeply searching for a purpose. I was, I was always questioning why, being led to the question of what exactly is my purpose now in life, and what exactly should I be doing, and what goals should I have. And some just to give an example, people in most of the people in the world, maybe their purpose in life is to enjoy, to make the most of life while they still live it. But really, that's not a good enough reason for existence, because the animals also enjoy a lot. If we look, the dogs are loving life, and the cats and the monkeys, all the other creatures of the world, they really are enjoying life. So could that really be the purpose of life? Some have the purpose of life is to be rich and to have lots of food and lots of acquisitions, but also the animals, if you look at some of them, also have a lot of acquisitions. A dog or a cat can go to a trash and can get a lot of food that we leave over, and they're really fed and provided for, and they're enjoying life very well. So if you look at nature and look at the world, those reasons for existence that most people have, or the purpose of life that most people have, aren't really they aren't really good enough, and unjustifiable, because most people live exactly like animals do and have almost exactly the same fulfillment that animals do. So by divine providence, I guess I was brought to books of Judaism in my search for purpose and meaning in life. So one of the first books I came across, and to this very day I use on a daily basis, is the Messiah Yesharim of the Ramchal. And I was just, when I started to read it, I was just amazed at what it was teaching, and how on the very first chapter he begins to explain the duty of man in this world, of what is expected of a person and why we're here. And this encapsulated me, and just to read you a little bit, this is from the first chapter. Ramchal explains. Ki olam nivro Shimush Adam. If you will delve deeply into the matter of existence, you will note that the world was created to serve man. Ki im ha'adam nimshach achar ha'olam midrachek meboro. If a person is drawn towards the world and distances himself from the Creator, Hinehu mitkalkel umikalkel haolamam imo. He will be corrupted, and he will also corrupt the world with him. ואם הוא שולט בעצמו ונדבק בבוראו ומשתמש מן העולם רק להיות לו לסיוע לעבודת בוראו. And if he can rule over himself and cleave to his creator and use the world solely to aid him in serving his creator, הוא מתעלה והעולם עצמו מתעלה עמו. He will be elevated and the world will be uplifted with him. כי הנה עילוי גדול הוא לבריאות כולם והיותם משמשי האדם השלם המקודש ומקדושתו יתברך. For it is a tremendous step upward for all creation when it serves the person who has perfected himself, and that person becomes holy with the holiness of the Blessed One, Hashem. And this is quite clearly encapsulates almost entirely the purpose of our existence and or at least what we have to go through in our life, in this world. Another thing from the Gemara that I read and took to heart is in Kedushin 40b, where it says, "Happy is the person who fulfills one good deed, for with that good deed he tips the scales to the side of merit for himself and for the whole world." And so that indicates and shows that really even one good deed, and if you know, we have to think of the world like a scales and the scales of merit, and even one good deed that a person does can tip the whole world onto the side of merit. And this is the power of a human being, and how a human being and a Jew can affect the world. And so this led me to, at the time I was reading this, to want to be part of that, to want to have that, that involvement with the world and that avodah, that service. And this, to me, it was a very appealing reason for existence. I think that it is the responsibility of every human being who can, and every Jew who has seichel, to look into the purpose of life and the meaning of life, because sometimes we often think, I'm born into a certain religion or whatever, and now I have to just fulfill it. We have to know why. We have to always look for the purpose and the reason. The Zohar in the Zohar Chadash of Shir Shirim says something quite tremendous. It says the wisdom that a person needs to know in his life. First, there are many things that he needs to know. So the first thing he needs to know is to examine his master, his maker, the secret of his maker, of Hashem. We have to seek out Hashem in our life. The second thing is to know himself. The person has to know himself, to know who he is, how he was created, whence he came, and where he is going, and to know how the body is to be corrected in this world, and how the soul will stand in judgment before the King of all. And the third thing is to know and to search into the secrets of his soul. That is, the nefesh, which is within the body. Whence it came from, where did it come from, why is it in this body, here today, and in the grave the next day. And the fourth thing is to examine this world and to know the world in which the person lives in, how this world has to be corrected. And then finally, you should look into the Torah, deeply into the Torah, to understand the upper world and to know the Creator, and he should learn everything about the next world from the Torah. And so I think it's important for everyone to consider this before the time that we're approaching Matan Torah, that why we are here, what our purpose in the world is, and the purpose of a Jew is, as the Ramchal explains in Derech Hashem. The goal of a Jew in the world is really to correct the world, because only the Jew has this responsibility. Only a Jew has the ability to fully correct the world and to bring it back to the stage it was before the Chet of Adam HaRishon, and the only means that we can do this is through the Torah which Hashem gave to us. We can only perfect ourselves and ultimately lead to the shlemut of the world, the tikkun of the world, through fulfilling our purpose and through fulfilling our and looking into the matters of the Torah. The final thing I want to say is, you might look at me and see that I've, Baruch Hashem, I look like a very frum Jew, and I have a beard, but this doesn't come about from nowhere. As with anything that you want to achieve in life, you've got to put a lot of effort, and it's not just the effort that matters. It's something that we can learn from from conversion. From my conversion story is that then the Rambam explains this, that we are affected mainly by our environment and the environment that we put ourselves in. So, you can think of it like, and this is how I see it, that every Jew and every Jewish soul is like a seed which has a potential to become a very great tree. But the thing is that that potential is latent. It's not manifest. It's just within an internal thing which is within a person. But the only way that potential can be realized, just as the only way that you can a seed can fully grow into a good tree, is by putting it into the right environment, and with the right conditions it will sprout and become a very wonderful and fruit-bearing tree. So I think the same is with a Jew and a Jewish soul. If you really want a Jewish soul and a Jew to flourish and reach its full potential, because a Jewish soul is capable of so much, then it is necessary to choose for the individual to make that free choice and choose to be put himself into the right environment that will allow for the flourishing and the revelation of that innate potential to be realized. And this is something that we can see in a Mishnah of Pirkei Avot. It says, Rabbi Yosef ben Kisma said, "Once I was walking on the road when a certain man met me and said, 'Shalom,' and I returned his greeting, 'Shalom.' He said to me, 'Rabbi, which place are you from?' I said to him, 'I'm from a great city of Chachamim and of Talmidei Chachamim, of scholars and sages.' He said to me, 'Rabbi, do you wish to live with us in our place? And I will give you 1,000,000 golden dinars, precious stones.'" Rabbi Yosef gives that answer, that why would he reject? And he even says here, all of the precious stones and all the money in the world, and he wouldn't move to a place where there's no Torah, because the thing is, Rabbi Yosef chose to live in a place of Torah and Chachamim, and that was the only way he knew that he could fully flourish and be the great sage that he was. And he knew that if he moved out of that area, even for a moment, all of everything he achieved and he could possibly be would not happen. It wouldn't, he would have lost his level and lost his. So the same with us and with me during my conversion. The first thing I was told to do was move into a Jewish area. So that's because only amongst Jews you can truly practice Judaism, and go to start attending the shul, and it's only by doing those things, living in a Jewish area, attending a shul regularly, going to shiurim, going to classes, and being close to the Talmidei Chachamim, the Rabbanim of our time, that we can possibly fully realize our potential and what we can become as a Jew. And so that's how I basically grew into and became who I am. And now that Baruch Hashem, I'm zocher to be learning in yeshiva in the evenings when I come from work, and really occupying all my spare time in learning Torah and Limud Torah Lishma, and I wouldn't have it any other way, because I know that Torah for me is life. And my mother sometimes asks me questions like, what, because she can't understand, I guess, why I've chosen this way of life and so much, and ask me questions like, well, what were you going to make of your life? Would you, maybe you want to be a certain someone in life one day, and it's good to go on vacations and to have lots of money, so go to university and all this sort of stuff. And I respond and I say, and I get that she doesn't understand. And I respond this, I say, I wouldn't have. That way of life is not for me. It's just not. I no longer have a taste for it. Maybe once upon a time I used to want to have something like that, but now that I've been exposed to the Torah and I've been exposed to the truth that really nothing else, everything else doesn't matter. The only thing that matters for me is Torah, living life as a Jew, as a servant of Hashem, and being part of the mission of the Jewish nation. Mamlechet Kohanim, Goy Gadol, Goy Kadosh, light to the world, because that's really our mission in the world, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So that's So I guess that concludes my story. And with Hashem, we should all be zocher to have a renewed sense of purpose and a renewed commitment with Hashem and with our learning of the Torah, and merit to have a chelek in the Torah, and bring about the redemption together through our service and through our observance of Torah, and should all merit to see the redemption of the world and of the great redemption and the rebuilding of the Beis Hamikdash in our days. Amen.
Everybody here. So my name is David Chaim Ben Abraham. I come from a small little island in Norway called Kristiansund. It's about 30,000 people there. And growing up in a Christian, Pentecostal, charismatic family, I was exposed to Judaism, sort of, to Israel, a love for Israel, but never to their end. I don't know if you know what Pentecostal Christianity is at all, or the circle that I grew up in, and I will elaborate a little bit on these inyanim, because we're living in a period of time today where Protestant or Pentecostal or charismatic Christianity has sadly infiltrated itself within the realms of even our circles, coming into our places to teach about Christianity, to try to glorify the picture of something that's so foreign to us, it's so far away from the Emet, from the Torah and from the mitzvot. So we need to understand how far away it really is. Where I come from, and the circles of Christianity that I'm used to, that I grew up with, is really something that's based on complete spiritual ecstasies. That's what people are high on. They love spiritual hype, the instant pleasure and satisfaction of an inner yearning that's for something, but they don't really know what this yearning is for. And it's expressed in spiritual manifestations, and people falling on the floor and rolling around and barking like dogs, literally. And I don't know if you understand anything what I'm talking about, and I'm very glad you don't. But I want you to understand that this is creeping in among us, specifically in Eretz Israel, through what is called Messianic Christianity. Messianic Christianity is a bunch of people which started basically with the Protestants. It's a bunch of people who think they're Jewish. They think that being a Christian is living a life of what is called a fulfilled Jew. That means if you keep Torah and Mitzvot and you believe in Yeshu, in Makshemon, that you will then be living a life of fulfilled purpose. So they preferably want Jewish people to believe in the Shtiyot. And this they do today, sadly, in great masses all over the world. You have them here, but mainly the ones who are here in London are not as Jewish in their appearance as they are in Eretz Israel. I was among these people. I had a long derech in my life. I grew up, as I said, in a small family in a small town, and I always had this sense of, I'm going to deviate from the subject, and I'm going back into it with Rabbi Hashem. Don't worry, my wife will remind me if I make a mistake tonight, she will tell me what I missed out, so then you'll have to forgive me.
That's a double story.
It's a double story, yeah. Baruch Hashem, I also finished the Giyur. I met my wife almost 5 years ago, Baruch Hashem, in Eretz Israel, in Yerushalayim HaKodesh. And we completed this journey together. We both separately on the derech, and Baruch Hashem, we joined forces and we cleansed ourselves from all the frustration of confusion, and we finished our Giyur here in London. So as a young child, I always felt like I was not where I was supposed to be. I felt like I was in a family that was not my family. It was the strangest feeling. And most kids go through this thing that they feel, oh, maybe not my parents, not my parents, maybe they adopted me. Maybe I was not supposed to be where I am. Someone made a mistake along the line there, and I ended up in this place. And I felt like that. But it was more than just feeling like there was a mistake. I was feeling a deep sensation of, who am I? Where am I supposed to be? And I used to sit up at night, looking out the window like some kind of crazy little kid, trying to figure out, who am I? Trying to talk to HaKadosh Baruch Hu by what I understood was HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But I never came to the understanding of this. So, growing up in that system, being introduced to everything in Christianity, with my grandparents, grandfathers, both preachers and establishers of churches. My parents were youth pastors. And the intensity of it all growing up was something I was used to. Then I chose to find my own path in life and try to figure out who I was. And I chose some few years where you call it off the derech, but it's far from lehavdil. It's not, I wasn't on any derech, I was just confused in life. And after some years I decided, no, I'm going to get myself together. I'm going to go to what is called a Bible school. And I'm going to go to this place, and I'm going to start learning, I'm going to start figuring out what this really is. So I started doing it. I went to this place close to Oslo. And I started to learn with intensity. It was so intense that I had what you call the Bible with you, with the Tanakh and the so-called New Testament, and Christian heretical writings. And I had them with me, even to go and sit in the bathroom, I couldn't leave it alone. I didn't know that halakha, you can read it, what can you do? But I didn't leave it alone. And this became apparent in the setting that I was. Now remember, I was in a Bible school. This is an organized Pentecostal system which was keen on evangelizing, which means that they go out, they have meetings, they have great massive happenings, which I was also part of, sadly, and was part of what is called the worship team, and I was leading the music there and all these things, and I started also preaching a bit. And through the fact that I was asking the right questions, which for them were the wrong questions, things started to intensify. So I discovered quickly that things here are wrong. What it says that Yeshua was saying, we're not doing it. And what it says in the Tanakh that Yeshua is supposed to do, he never did it. So I started to have a lot of problems. So I started to bring this to the realization of the people. And this was not met with a lot of simcha, to say the least. It caused a lot of problems. And I used to sit and learn, and then they would have these gatherings every single night. And I used to come and give a fiery drasha like this, and put everybody in their place, and then I would leave. And then the next day they would have a class in the Bible school against everything that I said. It was all wrong, this is what we believe in. So it was intensity like this for a while. And I caused a lot of uproar there, Baruch Hashem. Hopefully someone came to realization that something is not right. After a while, I wanted to move on from this place, and I asked them to help me out. I was put to work in a reception rehabilitation center. I was working in reception when people came straight from the street. It's a rehab center for drug addicts. And I used to help out people who came in there and receive them as they came in, and all these things that has to do with that. But I was there during the day, and in the night, I used to go out in the streets of Oslo. Foolish, I had no idea, because I had this simple emunah, if I'm doing what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants me to do, I don't have to worry about walking around in the street by myself and trying to convince people that they should believe that there is a God in the universe. Which was, of course, at that time, entailed also believing in a false Messiah, but I had no idea. This is what I believe. And you have to understand, when you're dealing with people who have grown up with believing something for such a long time in their life, that it's very hard to change them just overnight. Something that's indoctrinated, and you base your whole life on this. Like I've had these battles with my parents. Realized, I asked them all the questions, I put all the proof before them, but something that's so ingrained in you, something that's so penetrated your way of life, it's not something you can just let go of. So it was an interesting battle, and one day I met one African pastor that invited me to speak in his church. This was actually my first proper speaking in the church setting. And I went there, and I didn't speak English like today, so it's kind of hilarious. I didn't learn English in school. Baruch Hashem, I wasn't defiled by going to school. I messed up very early, and I didn't go to school basically beyond what you call here, I think you call it secondary. I stopped beyond there. I was finished. I didn't go to any more school, and I wasn't participating a lot in those circles. So I didn't learn English in school. The way I'm speaking today, I wasn't speaking like that then. So I was into hip-hop and rap music, and I was watching movies, American gangster movies, and I thought I was some kind of a thug when I was growing up. If you know what that means, like a teenage gangster that thinks he's the top of the world. Now, so I spoke like I was from the ghetto in America, and I was preaching inside of a church. So I'm saying, yo, you gotta listen, this is how it is. So it was quite an interesting setting. But in this meeting, there was an African pastor. This African pastor, he is the head of 42 churches in Kenya and in Uganda, and also some in Tanzania. So he invited me to come to Africa. So it was, wow, shocking. He wanted me to go to Africa by myself. Oh, I've done a lot of crazy things, but I'm not that daring yet. It took me about a year.
How old were you then?
I was about 21. It took me about a year until I realized, okay, this is something I need to do. So I was out of that setting, I was back where my parents lived, and I was already deeply into learning Tanakh and into this Messianic movement. And it was not by way of being in those circles, you have to understand. It was through the fact that I was studying the Tanakh, seeing that through history, all the original Christians were observing Torah and Mitzvot. When Christianity began, they were a small group of Jews who influenced a small group of Goyim, and this was the beginning of Christianity. They did Brit Milah, they kept Shabbat, they kept the Chagim, they kept the Mitzvot, and this is even in the instructions of Yeshua. Even though he's confused by what he's saying, because he says, don't break. I didn't come to destroy any of the Torah and the Mitzvot, he says in one of the Gospels, but rather to establish them. You should do that. That's what he says. He says that the rabbis sit in the seat of Moshe. You should do as they say. That's what it says in the so-called New Testament. But he also comes and say, I'm the master of the Shabbat. It doesn't matter if you go in the field and you pick chita, you pick it off the stalks and you eat it on Shabbat. It doesn't matter. It's no harvesting. We don't hold by the melachot. We don't have to worry. So he said, I'm the master of Shabbat. It's quite confusing. But in the Ikar of Christianity, they were all basically living a Jewish life. So that's what I realized. So I started keeping Shabbat. I started not referring by the Christian terminologies. I used to use Hebrew terminologies, and this changed and changed. And you have to realize that this is something that's massive today. It's massive. There was thousands of Goyim who look like, talk like, and act like Jews, who keep Shabbat, who have their meetings on Shabbat, who gather not on Sunday, but on Shabbat, who do everything that's seemingly Jewish. They talk and act and read and study and do the motions that a Jew does, even though they don't know. And they believe in Yeshua and all this in them. So there's a big movement of that today. The big problem with that is that a lot of them, they actually think they're Jewish. Something called the Hebrew Roots movement. And within the Hebrew Roots movement, there is a feeling of each and every one of them. Each of them belong to a certain Shevet. I'm from this Shevet, I'm from Shevet Dan, I'm from Benjamin, and all of them have this association to the Jewish people. Now all this originated in the Christian writings themselves. Paul writes, who is really the originator of Christianity, he writes that the Jewish people are the three, and, sorry, my English is not English, so the Jewish people are the three. And you, the Christians, are branches that is grafted into that tree. That's what it says in their writing. So they feel like they have this association and that they're living this fulfilled life. And these people are today all over the streets in Yerushalayim and all over the world, trying to convince Jews to believe in Yeshua, because thereby they will fulfill everything that they're supposed to do in life. This is very dangerous. Especially for Bachurim who have no idea about these people. They look Jewish, they talk Jewish, they act in every way, but they come with this trick, which is really bringing them into Avodah Zarah. There's no doubt, Christianity in its masses is Avodah Zarah. I know there is poskim who say that it's not, but the majority, the Ben Ish Chai, the Rambam, they all say it's Avodah Zarah. And why is it? Because they hold that something, this person is attached inseparably from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it has a complete unity with him, inseparable, and you should connect yourself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu only through this person. And that's Avodah Zarah. If you need to connect yourself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu through someone else, even if it's a rabbi, that's Avodah Zarah. That's a big problem, and it's creeping in among us, because we're getting this mentality fed into our mind that we can't really connect ourselves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu without all this aid, but we can. You stood at Har Sinai, your father stood at Har Sinai, your Neshama was there, everyone was there, and we all said Na'aseh v'nishma. We all accepted the same Torah, and you all have a chelik in it. You just have to acquire it. You also just have to do what you are supposed to do, and you can do it. That's the main ikar, you can do it. Hashem didn't give you a potential, like Yosef Chaim was saying, that you can just let it rot, put it on the pavement, and just let it die. No, He put for you to let it grow and let it sprout and bring about the reality of being a Jew. So he invited me to go to Kenya, and I decided to go. And I started a revolution down there, and it was beautiful. I didn't know what I was doing, and I caused a lot of balagan. And I started teaching them that all the Christianity that I learned, you should stop it right now, and this is the Christianity you should follow, start it now. And you know, you have to understand, if you go to Africa, and I went to some villages, like far out, places called Bukot, I don't know if you know, when you go to these places with their skirts and their spears and their whatever it's there, they've never seen a white person in their life, right? It's hilarious. Because if you go to some places in Norway, they've never seen a black person in their life, right? So you can see their eyes like this. So if I come to a village and we'll drive up, it's hilarious. You see all the kids, they're screaming, Musungu, Musungu. Musungu in Swahili means white person. They will say, white, 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 and they're running after the car, making a whole balagan. It was hilarious. So that had a tremendous impact there, right? So it was growing and developing, and we also went to Dar es Salaam, which is an island outside of, Zanzibar, which is an island outside of Dar es Salaam. And Zanzibar is the entrance of Islam into Africa. Islam came to Africa through this island. This island, at the time when I was there, this was at the time when Al-Shabaab was having a war with the Kenyans. And at this time, they decided to persecute all the Christian leaders. So it was a very interesting scenery. Now I was there to have meetings, big settings, and one of the first things we encountered was, that was in Dar es Salaam before we went there, was problems with witch doctors, Muslim witch doctors. And Dar es Salaam is the main seat in, I don't know if in Islam, but in Africa, in the Islamic world in Africa, that's the main seat of learning the mysticism of Islam, where they practice a lot of dark arts and a lot of witchcraft that's going on there, sadly, a lot of horrible things. And they were resisting me through these things. We had a lot of problems, a lot of struggles, based on the fact that we had this resistance. And I went up and I confronted the house of one of these witch doctors, and this broke down. I'm telling you just for you to understand that there is powers that these people hold by. The Christians, the Muslims, they have dark forces assisting them, especially within the Pentecostal Christianity. There is spiritual forces that they hold by. And that's assisting them, that's helping them and aiding them to bring this confusion to people for them to believe it. This is manifested in spiritual powers by touch, and spiritual powers by visions and by physical manifestations of things. My wife can also testify. She's once been in a meeting in America, in a church meeting, where the preacher is known for causing glitter and gold to appear in people's hands and in their tears. He speaks, and they create, you have to understand, they create a spiritual atmosphere in these places. And this atmosphere causes a lot of emotional turmoil in a person. Within that setting, they do certain tricks. Either if it's by something that's in the ceiling that comes down, and people think, because they're within this manipulative situation, that this is something that's occurring miraculously as a manifestation to verify what this person is saying. And because of that, we want to believe him, and we want to follow what he says, and we do whatever he wants us to do. We give him all of our money, of course. That's not lacking in Christianity. Give the preacher all your money. So that's why they're very rich and they're very influential, and they're trying to cause a lot of our Jewish brothers and sisters to fall into this trap. Now, after realizing that all of this was really not going in the right direction, and having a lot of changes happening in me as I was teaching these things and going through these motions in Africa, I went back to Norway and I decided to go to Eretz Israel. I'd been in Eretz Israel. My parents took me there as I was 10 years old, and I was there and I felt an extreme connection to something I didn't know. Something that made me feel home. Seeing Jewish people, I don't remember so much of it, but there was a connection. And I decided to go back to this Israel, and I want to find a place to learn. But of course, I was looking like, acting like, and talking like a Jew, keeping mitzvot and Shabbat and everything. And no, I didn't try to break Shabbat either. So, but anyway, that portion is already finished now, so I don't have to worry about it. I hope. So, so I wanted to find a place to learn, and I met with Rabbi Rosh Yeshiva Horowitz, and I wanted to go into what's called Lev Yerushalayim, but he said, since you're a goy, you can only come to the Ulpan and whatnot. But I was too nervous anyway, because I was hiding something. What was I hiding? I was hiding this belief, this indoctrination of the belief in Yeshua. But instead, B'siyata Deshmaya Gadol, HaKadosh Baruch Hu led me to meet my wife there. And together, we moved to Norway, and we continued on our journey. And then I took the toil of the biggest challenge, which was to liberate myself from Avodah Zarah. And today, they want to teach it inside of so-called learning centers, and they want to bring about a positive image of something that's so against everything we stand for. We are Jews, and as Jewish people, we have to strengthen our emunah and to know that there is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there is Torah Emet, there is Am Yisrael, and we're still alive, despite everything, despite all the challenges, despite all of the difficulties. We're still here, we're still doing the same Torah, the same mitzvot, learning the same, and we're trying. The main thing for everyone is that we try. It says in the Mishnah, in Pirkei Avot, that is not the result that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us. He doesn't want us to produce result. He wants us to produce effort. All that He wants you to do is that you do your best. Today there is sadly, and the Rav Dessler speaks about it, that sadly the Yitzhak of the generations, that people want to live a comfortable life. We don't need a comfortable life. What's the derech of the Torah? Sleep on the floor, eat some water, drink some water, eat some bread. That's it. Why are we saying this? We're saying this because you don't need all this comfortability. You need Olam Haba. If a person is focused on Olam Haba, your life will be completely different. If you put all your kochot into emunah, bitachon, and havirat shamayim, and focus your daily life, is this negea for Olam Haba? Is this something that will aid me in Olam Haba? That was Rav Shteinman Zatzal's mentality the whole time. He was always, is this something that will help me to get to Olam Haba? Is this something that's for that purpose? Now, if we have that mentality all the time to tell the story of him, that he was flying in America. Niagara Falls is in America, right? He was flying in America, and they took him on a private jet, and one of the guys in the plane said, here's the Niagara Falls. Get up and see it. Look, Rabbi, it's amazing what HaKadosh Baruch Hu has done. He got up from his seat, and then he stopped. And then he sat down, and then continued the flight. He refused to get up. Why? Because he said, I asked myself, is there a purpose for me, for Olam Haba, to see this, or is it just what I want? I found out there was something I want, let me sit down. Why do we have to go to such extremities? The reason is, if a person wants to, if a person understands, and it's hard for each of us, and the more Torah we learn, the more mitzvot we do, we appreciate and we understand it more. The reason is, if a person realizes the value of a mitzvah, the value of everything for the sake of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that you do, everything. Even the halacha, like putting on the right shoe first, and then the left, and tying the left, and then tying the right. Even the halacha like that brings you to life in Olam Haba, to do it right. Not just, oh, stam, that's all I do, and we don't keep Shabbat, chas v'shalom. I'm saying if you do everything with intention, I'm trying to do now a mitzvah for the sake of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, all the time you do it like that, all the time you're trying, not that you're a machine, you're doing it with intention. You want to do your life with intention. You want to learn Torah with intention, not just, oh, I want to learn Torah so I can show people how great I am, and how smart I am, and how clever I am, or just because I want to follow what my parents told me to do. No, you have to understand that Torah is yours. It's not yours by inheritance. It's yours because you have to choose it. Today you have to choose it. Tomorrow you have to choose it. Every day you wake up, you have to choose it. Every day you have to realize that this is your job in life. Your job in life is not to drive fancy cars, and if you're blessed with it, may you be blessed to have it for a long time. But the main ikar is not the fancy car, it's not the fancy house, it's not the fancy clothes. The main ikar of life is Torah and Emet and Olam Haba. If if a person has Olam Haba in his mind all the time, then these trivial things doesn't distract him. It doesn't kick him off. Because anyway, it's all disappearing. What matters is what comes later. And the reality is that whatever a person does now is what it will bring with him. Whatever a person creates in his life now is what the reality in Olam Haba will be. So if your life today is all about you, then in Olam Haba it's not going to be about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You have to reach a level that everything you do is about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that you always strive to want to learn, to want to grow. And if you continue your life like that until the end of 120, then when you come to Olam HaEmet, you will always increase, always go on, always be strengthened, always grow, always connect. So Baruch Hashem, I deviated a lot because I feel like the main ikar is not just to disprove something else, it's to prove to us who we are and what the Torah is. So Baruch Hashem, we finished our Giyur a year and a half ago now, Baruch Hashem, and we're trying our best to live this life, to have this mentality. I have a tzedeket of a wife who are doing a great job, and we have two lovely children who are also doing a great job, B'ezrat Hashem Yitbarach, and a lovely community, amazing Rabbanim who have so much to give, so much to share, so much to care for each and every one. And this is the examples we need. We need to look up to our Chachamim, listen to the Torah that comes out of their mouth, not play with the phones when they're speaking. Realize the value of every word that's weighed so heavily in years of learning and connection to Kadosh Baruch Hu that comes out from a simple statement. A simple statement in Torah is not simple. A simple statement in Torah can bring you to life in the Olam Haba. And that's not a simple thing. That's the purpose of your whole existence. So Baruch Hashem, and we all be zocher to life in the Olam Haba. We all merit to receive the Torah, simcha, be'ahava, be'yirah, that we will realize who we are, the value of a Jew is, how precious we are in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how much He loves us, how He chose us, Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, like the Ram was saying in the beginning, He gave the Torah to the nations, to offer it to them. They said no. But we chose, and they said Na'aseh v'nishma. And on this Shavuot, let's all say Na'aseh v'nishma again. And they say, Chachamim say, that if a person accepts upon himself the whole Torah unconditionally, this Shavuot, every Shavuot, he accepts upon himself, he has the koach, greater than Rosh Hashanah, to wave away all of his sins. If a person accepts upon himself the Torah Lishma, and say Na'aseh v'nishma again, a person can be forgiven all his sins and he can start again, but you have to make a commitment. He has to put himself really into it. And I want to try to do my best. I want to put aside my own pleasures for the sake of the Torah, for the sake of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for the sake of Shemayim, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu grant us Siyata D'Shmaya. Amen. Ki Na'aseh, we'll be married to see the building of the Beit HaMikdash. And Mashiach Zidkenu. Amen.
Thank you very much for the time, Mr. Khan. Amazing words. And to my very good friends, continue to inspire me always. Is that better? Everyone can hear? Yes. So, Baruch Hashem, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to speak and share our journey here with you. So, the journey to becoming a Jew. It's a passionate story. I'm haaretz, if you like. Very passionate. I owe that gratitude to my mum, actually. That's where it all started from. So a bit about my family history. So my mum was born to a Hindu father and a Catholic mother. And I myself was born to a Christian mother and a Muslim father. So between us, I think we've got a lot of the religions covered. So the journey took us from, I was born in a small country called Malawi, left it in 99, moved around England for a bit, and then we moved to a place called Middlesbrough. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of it. It's a very small town. If you have the opportunity to go around it, just go around it, don't bother doing it, just go around it. So as far as Judaism there, the last synagogue in Middlesbrough closed about 1990. So when we got there, 2003, we were slightly late. We knew nothing about Judaism. we were what's known as Seventh-day Adventist Christians. So Seventh-day Adventist Christians, they're like the normal Christians, but they observe the Shabbat. So from Friday sundown to Saturday sundown, that's when they observe like their holy days and stuff like that. And so we're like, yeah, we figured we're doing more than the other, these Christians. They pray on Sunday, what do they know? Yeah. So we thought we were doing everything okay. And it came a point in time, it took us a good while in Middlesbrough. And my mom was basically, any good thing you see about me, biskut. It's biskut. My mom, Mama should be nothing. My father passed away in 98 in Malawi. And so in 99, my sister and myself came to join my mom in England. There was political tensions and everything in Malawi. They were kicking out all the foreigners, the whole big balagan, the revolution thing happens all over the place. So yeah. So my late grandfather, he served in the British Army in India. So he obviously had a British passport, and so did all his children. Hence, they're picking out all the foreigners. So eventually, we found ourselves in Middlesbrough. Like I said, we were Seventh-day Adventist Christians. We were considered ourselves, to use the term frum, although it doesn't really apply. But we're very religious Christians. We used to go to the church on a Shabbat. Friday to Saturday, that's when, just the same as us, but we're no concept of melachot, so we're feeling holy, going to church, we're driving, getting the bus, all this kind of stuff. And we're like, okay, amazing. And then came a time when things started, Kadosh Baruch Hu was a way of knocking on someone's door to tell you, it's time, I've been waiting for you for a long time, it's time for you to wake up. Here's a way of doing that. So my mom was at uni, and she was studying forensic psychology. She wanted to be the one chasing after these serial killers and everything. Everyone has their own journey in life. That wasn't. I respect the decision, but obviously, Kadosh Baruch Hu saw that might be slightly dangerous for a lady and her 2 children. So I know who's had the chut to go to your place for Shabbat. When I first started, when I was first in Golders Green, I couldn't eat any yeast at all. I couldn't eat matzah. So for me, it was Pesach, holy ground. But that was okay. So on Shabbat, I rose on matzah. So the reason was when we were back in Middlesbrough, I ended up developing an allergy to yeast. Now this allergy went on for a few years. We never really knew what it was. We went to the doctors, go here, whatever, and they said, oh no, try this, maybe it's expert, maybe it's this, whatever. We used to break out in small rashes or whatever, and get temperatures, whatever. It went on for a few years, trying different things. And eventually, my mom was like, no, there's something more to this. The cream's just covering up the problem. What's really going on here? And so one night she decided, she's not going to give me creams, she's not going to give me any of this. And things got so bad that eventually about 2 a.m. I ended up in A&E. Because the allergy had gone so bad, it started cooking my skin from the inside out. So I ended up in hospital for about a week. The dermatologist, who said he'd been doing the job for like 7 years, he said he's never seen a case as bad as mine. So after giving him all the rundown and everything like that, says if we waited another hour or another maximum a few hours, my organs would have been shutting down. Now obviously, if you're very religious and stuff like that, especially as us being Christians, we're doing everything that we thought we were supposed to be doing. So Nakadosh Baruch Hu asked me, why is this going on? We've given literally everything. We're more religious than most of the people in you. More religious than a lot of the pastors and stuff like that. So what's going on here? And so journey started. My mom, obviously, being a single mom, trying to go to uni, trying to raise a family, and all of a sudden I'm falling ill with this. Then my sister, she starts retaining too much potassium, and it's a whole big problem. So with too much stress, in my mom's final year, before her dissertation, she was at her wit's end. And she just prayed to Kadosh Baruch Hu. She says, I'm doing everything. I'm a single mom, trying to better my life here. And you're attacking my children. What's going on? Please just show me what you want. So she said she's going to read the Bible, and from the beginning to the end, from Bereshit all the way to the end of the New Testament. So just show her what Kadosh Baruch Hu wants. And so she did that, and by the end of it, she came with a bombshell to my sister and myself after I would come home and everything, now that the whole ordeal was over. She says that she can't be a Christian anymore. And if, like as other Christians will know, the only thing in Christianity you shouldn't do is leave Christianity. That's like no, right? Doesn't whatever you want, just don't leave it. And so me and my sister were like, oh, come on. We lived our entire life as Christians. We're like, okay. So we tried opening the New Testament, saying, it says you're going to go to hell, you're going to go to all this. Okay, it was a whole big thing. But my mom, when she makes up her mind, when she sees the truth, no, it wasn't happening. It wasn't happening. So she's like, you know what? This is the decision I've made. You know, I hope you respect it. What I want to say to you and your sister is read the Bible for yourself from Bereshit all the way to the end of the New Testament. Make up your own minds. Whatever you decide, I'll be happy. I'll accept it. As for me, I want to be a Jew. Now at this point, we had never met a Jew in our lives. The only Jews we knew were written in Tanakh. Moshe, Abraham, Avinu, Yitzchak, Yaakov, all the Nevi'im. That was our connection to Judaism. We didn't know any better. And so I was like, okay, fine. So usually my mom she's always been a Baalist woman. She's been very inspirational to me. So like, fine. So I started reading from Bereshit again, and then eventually I finished to the end of the New Testament. And when you read everything in such a close space of time, because it was basically during the summer holidays and everything like that, and I didn't have anything better to do. Like I said, Middlesbrough, just go around. Yeah. So the place was steeped in drugs. They had a very bad drug problem. A lot of the neighbors were on first-name basis with the police, not because they'd seen each other a lot. They'd been in and out of jail so much, the police had no idea what to do with them. Had literally no idea what to do with them. So that was the area where we lived in. And like Yosef Chaim was mentioning, there are some places in Africa where if you see like a white person, it's like, wow. There is actually a place in England which existed like this. This was Middlesbrough. I was stopped in the street by a mother and young child. I was like, oh my goodness, Will Smith. I was like, they're not even 100% serious. Like, this was yeah. Yeah, so a place like this did exist. It's a lot better now. But yeah, as far as playing with, it was better to stay indoors. It was slightly safer that way. So basically from the morning till the evening, I was reading through the Tanakh, reading. It took me just about a week, and I managed to finish the whole Tanakh. And then another few days. So like basically in the morning till like 10 at night, that's what I was doing, just sitting there reading. And it's kind of it's like a mesh. You kind of see where the two join together and where the holes are between the two. The contradiction becomes so clear because you have the whole thing in your mind. And so I'm starting to think, I was like, I've come across these contradictions before, but as a Christian, you want to be seen as someone who has faith, who has emunah. And you're taught, if you question, you're taught as having you don't have emunah. And as a Christian, you devote your entire life to it. The last thing you want is to be seen as having no emunah. So you have to brush them aside. You have to. That's good. So you have to kind of brush them aside. You have to deal with them however you want, rationalize them however you want. It's like, yeah, but this, what about? At the end of the day, when you're forced to look at the facts the way that they are and read them as they are, the picture is completely different. So I was like, well, maybe I didn't get anything. So I started reading more carefully. I started to see the same contradictions started coming up. And like Yosef Chaim mentioned, one of the first ones is in the very, very first chapter of the New Testament, like the very first page. It's about the list of the genealogy. And he goes through all the genealogy and everything like that, and then stops. It was at Joseph. I was like, oh, so hold on. My mom actually is the one who pointed this out to me. Like, if Joseph is supposed to be the one from Ben David, and the Mashiach we know is supposed to be from Ben David, it later says in the Christian text that Joseph wasn't the father of Jesus. So how can that be? So that's the very first hurdle you have to kind of climb over to be a Christian. And then later on it happens. So you have even JC himself saying, serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Of course, also it says serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with all your heart, with your soul, everything like that from the Shema. So like, okay, so if he's saying this about God, how are we all of a sudden worshiping him? And okay, fine. So more questions started coming up. So there's one place where it's written that he's praying, he's diving into HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so again, you ask yourself, okay, so if he's supposed to be a God, why is he praying to himself? This doesn't make sense to me. So these are all questions that people know, but you have to kind of push them aside because there's a very big inyan where like the Satan is like doubt. So if you listen or if you have any questions, it means that the Satan is with you. And as anyone knows, you want to stay as far away from the guy as possible. So like, no, it's fine. I believe it. It's very much, they basically say you're up for a life of suffering and say, accept it because this is what Hashem wants. So even in the New Testament writings, it says, when you accept one, to take all these decrees, whatever, you're going to have so much suffering for whatever, and it's like, this doesn't make sense. Because we know in the Torah, God promises just exactly the opposite. So if you keep a mitzvot, even the Chokotai we just read, if you do all this, then He's going to bless us. In this world, He's going to bless us, in the next world especially. And but it seemed like a direct contradiction. And so there are tons and tons of Muslims. Okay, fine. Let's start from the beginning. Okay, my mom's going to be a Jew, fine. But I can't just go around following her, because if something goes wrong in the end or whatever, I can't blame my mom. I have to make my own decisions. So I find. So let's start from the basics. Where did the New Testament come from? So I started looking at the history. And after doing a bit of digging, I was like, fine, it comes from the Catholic religion. They're the ones who started this whole union of Christianity. But where did this original text come from? Started doing some digging. Turns out that only about 300 to 400 years after the events that they portray is when the first records are written. So I was like, wow, this is, like, I know people have good memories, but this is a bit ridiculous. You can't have an eyewitness account 400 years later. I mean, this didn't make sense. And this was, like, it was a huge blow to me. I'd lived my entire life this way. And now you have to kind of page by page understand that you've been living a life of a lie, and then another lie. For the whole book, it was like, how does this, surely there's a mistake here. So like, fine, go to a source that's known to keep all these manuscripts. In the Catholic Encyclopedia, it says the earliest known record we have is 300 years old. Like, well, this is a huge blow. So like, okay, fine, let's find out more. First book written, so if you read it, don't read it. If you know someone who's ever read it, there's a setup to the way the books are in the New Testament. And the setup that they presented in presents like a chronological account of the events from the birth or whatever. But the book which was written first was the book of Mark. That's like somewhere just like random in the middle. And then from the rest of them, they're commentaries and stuff like that, which is pulled from other sources and made the rest of the New Testament. And if you read, don't read. If you were to have a look at the contradictions, each book pretty much contradicts the other one. So in the very beginning, you have obviously JC telling you to worship Hashem. He says not a single letter, not even a tiny yud, is going to disappear from the Torah or the Nevi'im until Shema, until the heavens and the earth pass away. Nothing going to disappear. And then later on, you have it to where the New Testament is saying that if you believe in JC, you don't need the bris. This is the bris of the Kaddish Baruch Hu. He says you don't need it. The baptism is your bris. Like these are complete contradictions. There is no ways about it. This is what is written. This. You don't even need to interpret this. It's clearly written there. Kashrut gets thrown out the window. It says there's nothing unclean or whatever. That time has passed. And so you think to yourself, hold the phone. So we're made by a creator, Kaddish Baruch Hu. Kaddish Baruch Hu knows everything. He knew that this whole situation was going to come around. Why didn't he say anything? And why did he say his chukim and his statutes and his rules are forever? If they were just going to come one day and just, that's it, bye, what's the point of that? How many people, how many other nations have perished because of the law of God? And just to say, okay, that's done, we're gonna try something else because you guys obviously aren't listening. That doesn't make sense. So I started searching more for more answers. So I found in Nevi'im there's a few psukim. So one of them says Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will not do anything without first telling the servants, the prophets. That is a simple psuk. So that's what it is. He won't do anything without telling the servants, the prophets. So to me, I was thinking, okay, so I've read through the entire Tanakh, all the prophets and everything that we have access to. Not one of them mentions JC with this whole New Testament thing. Not one of them. And so I had all these questions. I was going to the pastors and everything like, okay, so tell me about, I bring the questions, and then they tell me, they give me some kind of answer, like, oh, we believe this happened, or whatever. And in the beginning this was okay, but these doubts kept coming up because the questions weren't answered. And then so I was like, the final one is like, okay, you know what? You say that we're supposed to prove the New Testament from the Old Testament. Show me one pasuk, just one, in the entire Old Testament, pick from anywhere in the entire Old Testament, one pasuk that proves the New Testament. Doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. So you say to yourself, like, oh, so they quote all these pasukim and everything like that, but you have to read a lot into them for them to make sense. So I was like, oh, this is a huge shock to me, and I found out there were so many other loopholes that we could spend days on this. But yeah, I found out that there was no truth to this New Testament. If there was any, then that's certainly not what we have today. So I started looking at it. So where do these festivals that we celebrate okay, what they, the one with the big fir tree and stuff like that, and the lights, yeah, it was like, it's a coincidence with the date, 25th of December and everything. And like, okay, fine. Clearly it's not written down anywhere in the Bible, even in the New Testament doesn't mention it. So where did this come from? Started looking at the history. So it turns out the Roman government, they had a thing for power. They really liked power. So there are loads of different religions, sects in them. And they didn't want machlokes. So they decided to combine the best of each religion and then make one religion. And so there was a sect, I think it's even mentioned in the Gemara, who worshipped the Asherah trees. And they were around in the Roman times. And the way you worship a tree is you have to bring it into your house. And the way that you make it a huda, you have to decorate it. That was the act of worship for the trees. And I was thinking, this is mamash, that's not what we're doing here. Like most Christians, 1.2 billion of them do this without actually realizing what they're doing. This is 100% of what that's right. So like, fine. What about the date, 25th of December? So it turns out, when you look into the history and stuff like that, JC wasn't actually born on the 25th of December. It was even close to it. It was, if anything, a few months, much earlier. So where did they come from? So there was this sect who worshipped the sun. And the sun, the days start becoming longer around the winter solstice time. And so they say the sun is reborn around this time. So if you smush all these together, put a big plus sign on it, you get Christianity. And so this is one of the things I like. When I was finding, this wasn't hard to find. This is easy to find, but the hardest part of this all was having the willingness to look and accept what you saw. Because that's one thing that you're told not to do. So I was like, okay, fine. So what about the rest of it? What about the one with the rabbit and the egg? So I knew, I'm not a genius in biology, but I know rabbits don't lay eggs. So like, where did this come from? So I started having a look. Again, both of those are symbols of fertility. Smush them together, Roman government, big plus sign, there you go. And even the name of the festival itself is the name of a pagan goddess, minus a few letters. And I started to find out that this is ridiculous. They've taken something which is supposed to be completely holy, the word of the Torah, made it into something else completely. So after that, I was like, I'm done with the New Testament. There are hundreds, so many more contradictions, whatever. So I was like, okay, fine. So I know that the Old Testament, that this is true, but I was like, okay, so how do I know that this is true? I mean, I've gone my entire life believing the whole thing, and I found out that half of it, or not a half, is like a very small fraction of what the outside world calls the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, was a lie, essentially. So I'm like, okay, fine. So I need to find proofs that this Old Testament is true. If I'm going to believe it, I need to find proofs. So I'm like, okay, fine. So I read through it again. I started to have a look, and I noticed, like outside, there are a lot of different versions of the Bible. Those different translations of it. You have the New International Version, King James, literally hundreds. And every church prefers a different translation. Now you'd think, okay, if it's all the Word of God, surely just one translation would be the same. But some would vehemently, they do not want this translation, they only want this one. And so that kind of got me thinking, I was like, well, what's the big deal? So I started having to look at the dates, and when you read them, they skewed slightly when they translate Hebrew towards the New Testament, some more strongly than others. And so that makes sense with the message of the whole church that they do. It's like, wow, this is, so I was like, fine. So as far as I know, the more modern we get, the more liberal everyone gets with everything, including the word of Hashem. So like, I need to go further back, as far back as I can, to find an English version of the Bible. So I started looking up. The King James is a well-known one. So I found, the one that we're reading is in 1769. I think it's interesting. So where did the first one come from? I went back and I found out that there's one in 1611. Now, there's something very interesting about this Bible, 1611 version, is it makes a distinction, as in Hebrew, when you're speaking to a singular or a plural. And the rest, like in English, I can say, how are you doing? I can be speaking to all of you or one person. You don't know, you have to determine by the context. Whereas in Hebrew and in this version, it made a distinction if you're speaking to one person or a group of people. All of a sudden, the Torah had a new depth which I never understood before. I was like, wow, so I read through the Tanakh again in that. And that was interesting, but there was still something niggling away at me. I couldn't understand what it was. And so I was like, okay, so let me find the Haskama for this. I was like, okay, fine. So I had to look, King James I of Scotland, very nice, whatever. And then I saw, okay, the Catholic Church. So I'd done research on Catholic Church. They were not nice people back in the day. So if they gave the Haskama for this Bible, I knew something was wrong with it. That's how it is. Like, looking back at all the crusades, look at all the bloodshed that spilled, and it was all for power. Even the doctrines put the Pope as a direct messenger from Shemaim. They say that he has a power that was given to him from Shemaim. This is how the whole doctrine system works. It was all to do with political power. There was at one point the Pope was the strongest single human being on the whole planet, yet he didn't have directly on paper an army underneath him, but he commanded all the armies of Rome. I don't know if any of you history outside of the Holy Roman Empire. I'm really going to find out what's really at the bottom of this. I have to learn Hebrew for myself, and I have to translate my own Bible, because this is too much. So I started looking at lessons. So I started Baruch Hashem slowly, the alphabet, learning. Rabbi Google was very helpful in this one. So I started alphabet slowly, and then when I read my first Rashid, I was like, wow, this is the most incredible feeling in the world. I was like, this is original text. I was blown away. I was like, amazing. So I started reading a bit more, and then eventually started reading. I read through the Torah, and I was like, wow. I wanted to get to such a level of understanding where I'd be standing in my house, Sinai, and just listen to a certain different. This was my dream. This is what I wanted to do. So until I managed to finish and to the time that we're in, this Zman Torah Teinu, it's like this is my first proper Shavuot. So as Hashem, I'll get my wish. So I started reading more and more, and then I got to a few verses which the New Testament hangs on. So there are a few references which the New Testament makes to the old one, which tries to put JC in a stead of Chas v'Shalom. And one of them is when HaKadosh Baruch Hu appears to Moshe Rabbeinu by the burning bush. And he has the whole discussion with him, and he reveals to him when HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals to Moshe Rabbeinu, he says, this is my name, this is my remembrance for 4 generations. I haven't made known this name to Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov. That was his name. Now, if anyone knows Hebrew, I'm pretty sure everyone here does, you can only translate that in the future tense. It's I will be. Right? Now, in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, they make a reference to this verse, and they translate it as the positive tense, as I am. So some of you may have heard this phrase from around, whatever. And that makes a direct reference because JC at one point he says, before Abraham was, I am. Now, if you look at all your English translations, they translate this verse as I am, that I am, which is completely false if you actually go down to the actual Hebrew. But these are the kind of small, so remember I said earlier, every church likes its own translation. It's because of these subtle changes that they make continuously throughout the whole thing, so it fits in with the New Testament. But if you just read it as it's presented to you, especially in the original language, everything goes out the window. So like, wow. So this was a huge revelation to me. It was the depth you get from the Torah is incredible. And so like, okay, fine, so how do I know that this text I'm reading is actually even true? I mean, fine, I found it here on the internet, but this would be for anything. So I started doing some searching, and I found something called Dead Sea Scrolls. I was like, that's interesting. So these are a record of our Torah, of our Tanakh, which was written at the time of the second Beit HaMikdash when it was still standing. So I was like, wow. So there's a section known as the Sea. They separated themselves. And they made a copy in different languages, in Ivrit, and some in Greek and stuff like that, about the events that were happening there, and different texts. And these were laid out in the area with the Qumran, by the Qumran caves. And this area, you have to understand, was completely unguarded for 2,000 years, in the middle of a desert. The way that it says it was discovered was some shepherd was shepherding his goats. His goat ran off, and he throws a stone into the cave to find his goat. And he hears this crash. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Goat stone, that noise. So he goes in, and then he finds this like a piece of pottery cracked. And inside this pottery he finds like a scroll. And so there were tons and tons of all these caves dotted around this place, all with scrolls of Sefer Torah, different books of the Torah, Nevi'im, some were just fragments, some just letters, but some like the Isaiah scroll, a complete copy of the scroll of Isaiah that we have today. So I started having to look at it, but the script that's written in is what's known as Paleo-Hebrew. It's much older and it's closer to Phoenician. So it was a slightly different alphabet that you have to learn, but essentially I started reading and I was like, wow, this is pretty much the same thing we have today. How for 2,000 years, you have the same record recorded down as what I'm reading here. I was like, for me this was like, yeah, this has become the nail in the coffin. Something inside me is like, if this was a time 2,000 years ago, then I know the New Testament was written, and the events happened at this time. So let me try and find something. Maybe someone would have noticed this guy doing miracles and just written something down. Found nothing. Found nothing at all. This was supposed to be during the time when he was alive. So, like, okay, if these people who it's been dated that this was 2,000 years ago, Tammuz second Beit HaMikdash, before it was destroyed, someone would have seen what had happened here and written it down, because even in the New Testament it mentioned some events that took place inside the Beit HaMikdash. I was like, there is nothing. This was the only link back to the past, and there's literally nothing. I searched, I was like, no, there's nothing. And so the search and the journey began. Now, when you come into convert, you come face to face with a few things, and one of those things is you come face to face with yourself. All the things that you'd held in the past previously, like this is true, this is whatever, you have to come face to face and you have to challenge, and you can't leave half-hearted with it. And so when things started, when we started making the change, then things started falling apart. People started losing jobs at Middlesbrough. Jobs were almost impossible to get. You had to know someone who knew someone who knew someone again before you get yourself a job. And for me, that was impossible, because just go around Middlesbrough. So I was over there, struggling completely, and then we're reading. We're getting closer to Kadosh Baruch Hu. This took years, getting closer to Kadosh Baruch Hu. Reading, trying to understand His will more, and the indoctrination that you get as a Christian is you can't let JC go. So the process of cleaning your brain of all this indoctrination took a while. So you start like, okay, so fine, he's not the Messiah, he's not who they say, who they pray to, he's not this, so you just compartmentalize him in your mind or whatever, and the further you get from there, the closer you get to Kadosh Baruch Hu. Now things started getting difficult economically. Our family were pretty much, like South London, were in the north of England, and it seemed in the middle of nowhere. Spiritually, it was pretty much a desert. So the only thing we had was a Tanakh. And so we started to see that certain times Israel had gone into problems. Kadosh Baruch Hu calls this cleansing. So one of the Nevi'im says that during certain times he's going to cleanse us, and he's going to test us. The way silver is purified, and the way gold is tested. And that's we knew that, okay, we're going to have to go through some difficult times, but we started to accept it. And so I was like, so when do we know that it's over? And so I was doing some research, and I came across this lovely story. So there were two ladies. They wanted to find out, how silver is purified. How do you purify silver? So they go to the silversmith in the town, and then they ask him, it's like, oh, we heard you're a silversmith here. Can you show us how we purify silver? He's like, yeah, no problem. He says, you see the flame there? You have to hold the silver at the hottest part of the flame. And you have to make sure you don't take your eye off it for a second. Because if you do, you lose everything. If it goes above the temperature, even just 1 degree, you lose everything. You have to hold at the hottest part and keep your attention on it. So they ask, so what does that do? It says you start to see the impurities flying off it. Like sparks, sometimes they just melt, but you start to see them. And wow. So they asked him, how do you know when it's purified? He says, that's the easy part. I see my image reflected in it. I see my image reflected in the silver. That's how I know it's purified. So that's how we knew that's a level that Kadosh Baruch Hu wants us to get to. But from where we were to get there, like we knew it was a long way. We just didn't really know how long a long way was. It took a while. So this is while I was still in Middlesbrough, and then things started getting worse economically or whatever. And I was at uni at the time, and I used to come back for breaks. And then one time when I was at uni, this was 2011, we started, because you have to understand where we came from, like the conversions to any religion, you just say a couple of magic words, that's it. Go for a dip, that's it, you're converted. So we're like, we're going to be Jews, that's it. As far as we knew, we're Jews, we'll keep in Shabbat more. I had to think about electricity, because I didn't want to turn on or off. Once Shabbat came, I didn't want to turn it on or off. I don't use a microwave, whatever. Everyone, people would eat hot food, I didn't want any of that. So the reason is, because I'd learned in college, like this isn't the reason why we don't like to just went out there, like a version of an actual explanation, but this is what I came up with in my mind. So I went to college and understood that when you generate electricity, you have to generate it as and when you need it. So you can't store the amount of energy required to light the entire nation. So one of the things that our lecturer used to bring to us in the class is he used to show us a graph. He says, this is the graph of all electricity that's been used during the day. And you see these times where it just goes crazy off the scale. He says, this happens at half-time during England matches. I said, what's going on? Why all of a sudden everyone's using electricity? You'd think it would happen at the beginning because everyone turns their TVs on or whatever. And he said, why? He said, no. Everyone goes out and everyone flushes their toilet at the same time in the entire country. So it was like that spike in electricity is what you see. He says you can't store the energy, so we have all these these turbines which you need to burn a lot of fire in order to get the steam and everything like that, and it has to be ramped up. So I knew that simply turning on something was causing a fire somewhere to be stoked, and so we knew that okay, the Torah clearly says don't light a flame. And so for me that was always a big problem. I couldn't really understand why, but I just didn't like going anywhere near that switch. I knew either all the way on or all the way off. So that was so I started to understand that okay, there's something a bit more here to all of this. And so when I came back from holidays and I go back to uni, I think we started really understanding more about Judaism and stuff like that, and okay, that you need to do a formal conversion. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. So how long could it take? Should it be just a day? Or little did we know. So we wrote to the best thing. I said, okay, this is our situation or whatever. We're living in Middlesbrough, I'm going to uni or whatever. And they're like, okay, because I had to contact a Rabbi J. Colum in Sheffield. So thank you, I'm sure someone knows him. As Jews, I found her very close. So I mentioned someone's name, someone like in Australia would know the same person sitting in front of me or something. So that was, he pointed us in the right direction. And so we wrote to the Bethtin and I received a letter. I was like, thank you very much for your interest. But there are a few problems. We experienced a lot of applications at this time. We're a bit busy. And to the effect of please try again later. It was like, are you serious? We never come across anything like this before. I was like, so we wrote to the rabbi. I was like, oh, we were completely distraught. It's like, what's going on here? And he's like, no, they have to push your way 3 times or whatever. And just write to them a bit more, tell them about where you are and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, fine. So I wrote back to them, gave them more detail and everything, and then they actually sent a letter. So like our letters crossed in the mail, asking us for the information which we just sent. So when we read it, like, oh, that's handy, we sent it. So reading through that, I was to ask more and stuff like that. And then eventually got a response back after a couple of months, and I said that thank you very much for your interest and everything like that. But there are 2 major problems. A, we don't convert students, and B, you live in Middlesbrough, which is essentially the middle of nowhere. You need to be in an active Jewish community, you either go down to Manchester or London. And so, okay, fine. So things were obviously a bit strained economically or whatever. And so I started trying to find work or whatever. Nothing. It was Middlesbrough was a very industrial place. So when they shut down all the industry and started importing, you had literally about 50,000 people with no jobs almost immediately. And to get a job there was insane. So that really fine. So more problems with my passport in Malawi. Anyone who knows me, that's a whole different story. Okay. So we eventually moved back to Middlesbrough and then started getting more and more in touch with Judaism as much as we could. So I printed out the 13 Principles of Faith, started reading those and everything like that, and we started streaming a Shabbat service. Yes, it's absurd now. We had no idea that you couldn't really do that. So we're sitting there on Shabbat watching from the monitor this lady rabbi giving all this information and stuff like that. We didn't know better. We just knew Jews were Jews. That was it. And we always used to, one thing we always used to do is anything that we could find written in the Tanakh, we'd keep as much as we could. So with, like for example, the festivals like Yom Kippur, Chag Matzot, Pesach, and we'd always do as much as we can, as best as we could. And something happened. So during this time where we're getting closer to Kadosh Baruch Hu, there's more kapara that needs to happen. So much more balagans had to come in. So it came a time where things were very bad economically. Like if anyone's from India, you remember chapatis? That was, yeah. So it's basically made of flour, water. You knead it with some oil and salt, and you fry it. You put it like on an open pan. That's what you had. And so for a period of time, things were so bad. Like this is all that we could have. This is all we could afford. So we made chapatis. I'd knead them at home and stuff like that. We'd bake them, and then we would think, hold on, wasn't Pesach around this time sometime? And things had gotten so bad that we literally had no chametz left in the house. All we had was chapatis. So we'd forgotten about Pesach, and Kadosh Baruch Hu helped us keep Pesach. So we looked at the calendar. The same week we had no food, only chapatis. This is what we had. And I'm like, wow, how does this even work? So I remember there's a pasuk in Dubai where Kadosh Baruch Hu promises us. He said, if you seek me with all your heart, all your soul, all your might, you will find me. That's a promise I had to hold on to. I had nothing else. I had to hold on to that promise. So like, I'm leaving Christianity, I'm leaving all this kind of thing on this promise. And I started finding more. And then one of them, it says in Aliyah Nevi'im, it says, Hashem says, I don't change. And therefore you sons of Jacob are not consumed. So you look and if Christianity had any kind of validity to it, that would constitute a change in the Kodesh Baruch Hu. And Hashem here himself says he doesn't change. He says, in Isaiah 66, he says, he's the one who made everything, the heavens, the earth, everything's his, and he decides to give it to whom he wants to. And later in the New Testament, it says that when JC was being tested, the Satan said to him, I can give you all the nations of the world if you just bow down to me. So there seems to be a huge contradiction. So after that, my mom was like, I'm done with the New Testament. I'm even going to read it ever again. So like, yeah, did the same thing. And so things we started to see little sparks of the Kodesh Baruch Hu. I always remember this purifying, this cleansing. And we knew that what we'd done is Avodah Zarah by this point. And everyone knows Avodah Zarah, it's Chad Mitah. There's no effect about that. And so like anything less than that is a bonus. So it was difficult. We went through some very, very difficult times. And when we eventually got to the realization that, okay, things will get worse, but they will get better. I remember one night, again, things were very bad, but we had no chapatis this time. We didn't really have anything. And I'm like, Hashem, next time we're going to get money, it's going to be like in a good few days, but we have literally nothing to eat. We're nothing. But I remember that pasuk, and we both like, this is what Hashem wants, we accepted it. And there was a certain calm that you have in your heart. Hashem's going to take care of it. About 5 minutes later, Mama, are you expecting anyone? You? Goes to the door. A new neighbor moved in across the street. 2 plates of food in her hand. Comes back, my mom comes through the door and says, Hashem's given us some food. This is what Hashem was speaking about. He said, you seek me and he will provide. There was a certain level where Hashem won't let you go below. No matter how bad things get, he won't let you go below. Remember that with the silversmith? He has to keep a very close eye on him. So every now and again, he'd let us know that he was watching us. Every now and again, no matter how bad things got. Then the next day comes over, she comes over with a big pot of food, and eventually that saw us through for the next few days until we were able to start getting back on our feet. She was a vegetarian. So just in case you wonder, to give you non-kosher food, no, she was a vegetarian from Thailand. It was mamash, so we started to understand that, okay, Hashem, he doesn't only see what we do, he sees our hearts as well. That's the most important thing. And so, like, okay, fine. So we started, after basically coming to a realization about Christianity and stuff like that, one of the things which it said not to do was the bris. Because if you do the bris, you will give your whole denying, you're denying that the whole idea of Christianity. So, like, what we need to do? Mama was like, we need to get a bris. Mama was like, we need to get a bris. I said, that's what we need to do. So, like, yeah, this is amazing. So we started filming in, like, we had no idea. We were doing as best as we could. We knew Moshe. So the way that it was, like, again, we learned everything just from the Tanakh. We'd never met a Jew, we didn't have a rabbi we could really ask. And we knew that, okay, one thing that Kadosh Baruch Hu said to Avram or even to Am Yisrael is that if you buy a slave, especially, you have to make sure that he's got his bris. So anything else, like, okay, fine. The man in the house has to have his bris. So that's what we did. So we phoned up a mohel in London. We had no idea that they were such mohel that only do babies. We just thought, okay, bris is a bris. So we phoned up. It's like, yeah, no, so we're going to do adults. We're like, wow. Okay, thank you. But he did wish us batzlacha. I don't think he understood like the situation we're in. But we wish us batzlacha. So we're like, oh, thank you. Then we did a few phone calls and stuff like that, and found it was going to cost quite a bit, especially for an adult or whatever. Like, wow. So I had one of my uncle on my late father's side. So they are Muslims. So he's like, you know what? Because I found him, I was like, is there any jobs? Because they lived in Leicester. So he's like, yeah, I think I can get it because I'm a manager here or whatever. It's like, okay, amazing, because we need workers. This is a bit too much. So Baruch Hashem started doing a derech for us. So eventually I moved down to Leicester, lived with my immediate father's family. And we'd always visited them before time and stuff like that. But when we were Christians, so that no problem, because even they knew it wasn't any truth to it. And so they still assumed we were Christians, whatever, and then we were still going on. And then I can't remember what happened. Something happened, and they found out I'm to be Jewish. And they're very hurried Muslims. So here I'm living in the house, asking them, do you know Muhammad? Because I want to get married. And he's like, actually I know, and he's from Jordan, and we can do it. So the initial reaction was like, okay, we'll see what's going on, because they assumed that it was an uninformed decision or whatever. So they're like, okay, I've got this guy, everyone I've taken to see him, spoken to him, whatever, they become Muslim, because he's opened their eyes and they've seen. Okay, fine. So they arranged a meeting for a couple of nights later. He was a Sharia lawyer, and so we went. We got there about 7 o'clock, and the whole family was there. And then we started speaking, just small things and stuff like that. And we started so we ended up getting into the situation of the Akedat Yitzchak. And I was like, yeah. So he mentioned, wow, you guys, you say Yitzchak was the Akedat. He's like, we actually believe it's Ishmael. I was like, hold the phone. How can you say it's Ishmael? I mean, it clearly says it was Yitzchak. He's like, no, some Jew changed it. I was like, okay, I see where this is going. So 3 hours later, midnight, my uncle had to drag us away because literally from like 7 until midnight, we're just debating on the finer points. And they tried, like, some of the things, unfortunately, which I say is like, it's the same as ours. Look, we're all the same prophets. We're all the same. They're the same, whatever. They're the same prophets. You have Abraham, you have Yitzchak, I was. But one thing which I knew when I started learning Hebrew and everything is I came across something about the importance of a name. The name isn't just a label you stick on someone so you can recognize them from far away. A label in Judaism, a name, is the essence of a person. It like encompasses, it records the entire history of everything that person has ever done, will be, and is at the moment. So it wasn't just a name. So when I started, when this Muslim guy, he told me, he's like, that was the same name. So I was like, oh really? So he said Abraham. I was like, okay, so they call him Ibrahim and Yusuf and stuff like that. But some of the major prophets that we have in Yiddishkeit were just flat out missing from there. So like, how can you say you have the same Bible and yet you're missing all these major prophets? And they're like, no, this is what we're given. The Jews changed and added, and so what we got was a pure form. I'm like, okay, good, I'm happy for you. And so one of the things said, if you look closely in your Tanakh, in your book, you'll find that there's a name of one of our, there's this Muslim name which is written in there, and something like Abdul or whatever. This is what he told me. So he assumed that I hadn't actually read the Tanakh. So I said to him, if you find from cover to cover any single pasuk it says this name that he says, that'll be a Muslim. You couldn't find it, because it doesn't exist. But on people who don't actually know, haven't read, it works for them. But they have the same names, but they're not the same person. Like we have a Kadosh Baruch Hu, we have many names of Kadosh Baruch Hu. He has many names, and each one encompasses a different aspect of a Kadosh Baruch Hu that we see it as a different aspect. And the importance of a name, it's lost to anyone else who's outside this. And so yes, after a few hours, my uncle and stuff respected the decision that I was going to be Jewish. Which my late father was a Muslim. But the way that it worked in Malawi, there was like a minhag, if I could call it that, is that whatever the religions are, people marry, but the children are raised in the religion of the mother. So because my mom was a Christian, so we grew up as Christians. And so there wasn't really much of a Muslim influence. And yeah, so the next day he gave me like a pamphlet to read. It was from their Quran, and it was an extract. It was about the story of Moshe and Am Yisrael in the desert, and how this all came about. And according to them, it says that Moshe got so angry with Am Yisrael that he prayed that the Kodesh Baruch Hu punish Am Yisrael and give him 40 years of wandering in the desert. Now, for me and for anyone who actually knows the Torah, you know, a few books later or earlier, Moshe is actually willing to give up his entire being as a soul, as a person, to save Am Yisrael. It says, remove it from your book. If you don't forget, remove it from your book. This is the kind of person Moshe Rabbeinu was. And to say that all of a sudden, this one has become, I don't know, some jihadist all of a sudden, it doesn't make sense. So for me, I was like, when I saw this, I was like, no. So looking at the history, okay, when did Islam come about? Earliest known, 531 AD, well after Christianity, well after Catholicism, well after a lot of things. And they even include, they make mistakes of, they have stories, first of all, of JC, which after doing the history and research I've done, was, okay, that's a lot of nonsense. If you include this in your book, there's something wrong. And then they start mixing up the two Miriams. Miriam, they say, was JC's mother, and Miriam and Neviah. They say there's the same person. I don't know how people lived to in their books, but we know that Miriam and Neviah was buried. But yeah, so there's tons of contradictions. So search through all those, and yeah, none of them checked out. So eventually, Baruch Hashem, our neighbors, when they got wind that we were going to be Jewish, things started to change. It was a very strange. Something changed in the atmosphere. You can't put your word, you can't put your finger on it, but something changes. Like when I say bad neighbors, I'm not talking like I just don't need a planning permit to extend my loft, whatever. No, we're going to put a brick through your window because we want to. If you don't do what we say, these are the kind of neighbors. So on the street, there were 50 houses on the street. About 4, 5, sometimes 6 were drug dealers on the street. 50 houses. That was what it was. In the beginning, when we moved in, things were bad. There was a house down the road used to come joyride cars, crashing at the end of the street, burn them. This was fun for them. So I don't understand. This is what these are, the weekly occurrence. I think eventually things got better. So yeah, so these are the kind of neighbors that we had. And then when they found out we were Jewish, things quickly went downhill from there. We'd never done anything wrong to them. We'd never done whatever, but something gets into them, I guess. And yeah, so to the point where the last few days we were there, is my mom actually heard the neighbor say, she was speaking to some of her friends, said that I want to burn her in a house, pour petrol at the back entrance, at the front entrance. I want to hear her screaming through the wall as she comes back. This is the kind of hate that crept up. And so we knew, okay, this was a Kodesh Baruch Hu, this was the message that we had to leave. And so Baruch Hashem, I finished my work in Leicester, and then we eventually moved down to, because following the advice of the birth team, like we had some family in Manchester, but there's family and then there's family, you know, it's like you say hi, and so that's, yeah, so we weren't going to Manchester, so we moved down to Croydon with our other family, Baruch Hashem. I think things were okay. Then we moved out to a different place in South Croydon. And so we found eventually, we just wanted to go to a shul. But when we were in Croydon, we found this other, like, Seventh-day kind of church or whatever, but they call themselves a Church of God. So they're very, again, like Shabbat, whatever, people more frum, they cover their hats, like women cover their hair and stuff like that, on the Shabbats, whatever. They're very happy singing and stuff like that. And they're like, you know, we're waiting in the meantime, we need something. But yeah, once you find out that you fast on Yom Kippur, and that you keep all these other kind of festivals, and you don't believe in JC, it's a problem to be a Christian if you don't believe in JC, apparently. So yeah, so things didn't really go so well there. So we're living with one of the ladies there. She had a house which is further like South Croydon, so we're living there for a while. And when she got wind that we wanted to be Jewish, because we'd started going to this Reform place in Bromley. Like we didn't know at this point that there was such a huge difference between Reform and Orthodox. And so we were going, like, you know, we just need something, some kind of Judaism. And we got there, and everything seemed, okay, whatever, those mixed seating, whatever, like where we came from in Christianity was mixed seating, no big deal, whatever. And then things started going, so we were there for a few months or whatever. We saw first bat mitzvah. We had women, like rabbis and women chazanim, playing the guitar on stage, whatever. Well, we didn't know any different. This is what it was. And then it started approaching the summer, when the days started getting longer. And then we saw something strange, because we usually only ever went there for Shabbat morning. We never got a chance to go there for Shabbat afternoon. Like we used to take the bus there, whatever. And then we were there for almost a Shabbat. And then we noticed, like, in the background, huge window. In the background, massive sun. The normal sun that we have. And you have on stage, this rabbi, doing Havdalah. And you're thinking to yourself, there's no safek here. The sun is out. Like if you turn around, you see it. Like the Torah says clearly, do not light a flame on Shabbat. We have at least by everybody walking, the day begins at evening, and has a day. Like what are you doing? So when we saw that, we were like, they really have no respect for Kadosh Baruch Hu. They really have no respect. And that was the last time we set foot in that place. We did contact them to convert, and we found out that we missed the conversion by 3 months. We had to wait another year, which Baruch Hashem was a blessing, because shortly after that, that's when we saw this Havdalah in the middle of the day. And so what next? So during this time, we had written to there was a shul in Croydon. It's a very small shul in Shirley Oaks. Again, because we were back there trying to find work, whatever we had on our feet was difficult. And so we're living in this South Croydon place. Again, the same stick which HaKadosh Baruch Hu uses to chastise some people. Were economically very, very poor state. And we couldn't afford a stamp like this Havdalah was. But when HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we knew things would get better. And there was this shul. And we knew that you needed to write to the shuls for entrance or whatever, for security reasons. So we went fine. So this shul was must have been, maybe 8 miles walk in total. So my mom wrote a letter to the rabbi. I went there the first time, couldn't find the place at all. I was looking around it, it looked very like a residential place. It was very, like shuls in some places are very well hidden. Like you would never know. So we didn't know. And so I asked the security guard or whatever, he was patrolling the place, and he was like, no, sorry, I don't know. So I ended up walking back, and then I was like, I went to the place and I couldn't find it, and then we did more inquiries and stuff like that, and we had to look on Google Maps and it shows a picture. I was like, I walked past this. So again, I had to walk. By this time, I was nearing 16 miles. I had basically on very little nutrition. I was walking, I could barely lift my legs up at this time. I was basically walking back another 4 miles because my legs didn't come that far off the ground. And if anyone passed me in the car, they think, this guy's been drinking. And I was walking, I physically couldn't lift my legs anymore. So I walked the whole 4 miles and stuff like that. And I was like, if there was any chance of us turning away from Judaism, from Kadosh Baruch Hu, it would have been wrong, but this wasn't it. So we gave the letter, Baruch Hashem. So after the whole incident with the reform place, we moved back to, because the relationship with the church people had gone down the toilet when they found out they were Jewish. Because if you're going to leave Christianity, don't be a Jew. Like that's the opposite of what you're supposed to do. They even have a term for it. They say, you're a Judaizer and stuff like that. If you try and be too many Old Testament rules, as they call it. And so things went down. And the basic view in Christianity is that you can do whatever you want to whoever you want, as long as you confess on the night, you're fine. And so there were in this landlady's house, and she played that card as much as she wanted. We were seen as less than human to them. So she said, did whatever, swore, whatever it was she wanted. She just prayed at the end of the night. You could hear her singing her praises or whatever. And that was it. This I was, and then we moved out. But it was before we moved out, we were basically in this kind of situation. It was very tough, and I was trying to find work and everything like that. And we live in a small town, and next to it was another town. And I was thinking, how is it? I know Hashem is helping us. I know you're helping us. I used to pray. I know you're helping us, but things are still, very, very difficult. So there was one time I went to the shops, like in the local town, it must take a good few hours to visit every shop. You have a job, just as a part-time or whatever. And everyone's like, no. I was like, fine. I was like, okay, I'll come up. Do you do apprenticeships or whatever? I was like, no. When I'll never shop again, and I will shop in the next city. I was like, just for free. I'll work for you for free. Just give me something for free. Not a single one. And I come home, I'm thinking, what's going on here? So I read the parasha, which I have a very good connection with, Kitabo. If anyone knows of the Klalot, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu promises, and even in the Nevi'im or whatever, says you try and sell yourself as slaves, and no one will buy you, even for free. That's how I knew this wasn't an accident. This wasn't some happenstance. This wasn't Mikre. This is the HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hand. We had to be cleansed, and we started going through the list. I could almost have like a checklist of Kita, all the things. Remember the yeast allergy I told you? No doctor had any idea what was causing it. My skin was cooking from the inside out. At one point I was on 50 tablets a day. It was almost just crazy. There was no cure for it. One of the Klalot said, I'll give you another machala from Mitzrayim, that there will be no cure for it. No one will be able to heal you. You'll have a fever, you won't be able to get healed from it. This Klalot, I'm having a look at my life. It's like I had a pen, I would take. I was like, yes, you're right, yes, you're right, yes, you're right. And this is how it was. And the closer we started to get to Judaism, something amazing started happening. You could start to see when you read that one of the Klalot no longer applies. That was the turning point. I was like, wow. So I eventually moved over with my family later on in Croydon, and then this other shul, this Orthodox shul, they responded and they phoned us. I remember I was so happy about it. It was much amazing. It was an Orthodox shul. It took a few months to respond, but this was a few months where we went to this reform place. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted us to see, is this really what you want? I'll wait until you decide that you don't want to be at this place because I don't follow my laws. I'll wait for you. And only once we come to the decision that we're going to be reformed, we're going to be Orthodox. And this rabbi phones us. And it's like, I've already let us, already took so long, or whatever. I invite you to come to us for Shabbat. And so again, we were very firm, so we busted. We took the bus to one Shabbat. And we had no idea. We had no idea we couldn't do any of these things. Because we knew driving was a problem. I'd come across an article, whatever. Okay, that when you have the accelerator, whatever, you push the gas. The small combustions. Okay, so I knew that was lighting a fire. I'm not driving. I have a bus pass. That's it. There's no fire. So that's in my mind. That's what I think. So that's what we went. And then eventually, the rabbis was telling us and stuff like that. And then we realized that you can't be doing that. So okay, fine. So after a while, we started walking to shul. It used to take about an hour and a half each way. But Baruch Hashem, the first time we got there, we knew that this was a place of Kedusha. So there was a feeling there. It was incredible. And we knew that this was a place. So after Shabbat ended, we asked the rabbi, oh, please, can we come again? He's like, yeah. And then eventually we became regular members there and stuff like that. Now in Malawi, there was one Jewish family who was left. They went to school with my grandma, actually, and we never knew. My mom did know some people from there, but we didn't know that they were Jewish or whatever. So anyway, so we're in Croydon Shul, and then a few months down the road, we hear that there's a levaya, there's a stone setting coming up. So I'm like, oh, that's amazing, it'll be part of the community. So we went there, and then they had a special, the soda at the shul. So we go to the shul, and who do we see there? That same family, who my mom's family went to school with. They were Jewish. We met them there, and my mom and this lady recognized each other instantly. They'd seen each other growing up, and they never knew, and all the places in Croydon. And we find her there. We're like, wow, this was my mom. This was because I see the hand of Hashem. Then eventually it's like, oh, amazing, we're in London. Wrote to the Beth Inn, get a response back. Although Croydon is a step up from Middlesbrough, it's not yet good enough. I'm serious, because we didn't know about the whole idea of being in a Jewish environment, whatever. We saw what London, looked at the map, Croydon, London, Bob Johnson, that's it. So we were there. I was like, no, so okay, fine. So things, obviously, there's friction at home, because we want to be Jewish, and they don't want us to be Jewish. And so friction broke down. And yeah, so it came basically a time where we just had to leave, so we couldn't really stay with our family. And so must have been about midnight. Phoned the King Solomon Hotel. We were like, do you have a room? Because we were like, we have to move out and we have to live in a Jewish area. It was just either now or never. And by this time, Baruch Hashem, we had jobs. I was working as a wheelchair technician somewhere in Croydon. And yes, Baruch Hashem, things were going up. So I was like, okay, fine, we're going to do this. About 1 o'clock, we checked in the King Solomon Hotel, 2015, and that's where we started with the Judaism and stuff. And then like, okay, fine. So now we're here. So we're right at the best thing after a couple of months. Like, amazing. Now find yourself a flat. And then right back to us. It's like, are you serious? Come on, we've actually come from halfway. Like, but at this point, we realized that this wasn't just a man-made thing here. This whole journey was tailor-made by Kodesh Baruch Hu. The length of time it takes for the Beth Din to respond and to do it. Everything was tailor-made by Kodesh Baruch Hu. Like, it might be easy to sit there and think, they're just making it take long or whatever. But I can honestly say I'm grateful for every trial I've ever been through. Because I know what it's done. I've helped people who've been through similar situations or not been in a good place, because I know there's bad places. So I'm grateful for everything Kodesh Baruch Hu was going through. I'm grateful. And so I started working. And then Baruch Hashem could see more of the cloud started to disappear from Kitavo. Started to disappear. Baruch Hashem had a job. Although I had to schlep like 3 hours some days on like one way, it was worth it. Having to schlep for like 16 hours and it doesn't compare, so I was grateful for everything. And then the problems started happening when things started happening towards the winter and Shabbat started coming early. I was like, I didn't want to break Shabbat, although we hadn't been told to or whatever. Is the connection that we had with the Shabbat was so strong that we didn't want to break it. So I started having a word with my boss, like, can I leave a bit early or whatever? And all of a sudden, okay, so I had to stay back extra, make up the extra hours. I wasn't already, but I was doing more than that anyway. And then, all of a sudden I had to leave at 1:30, and all of a sudden a meeting would be scheduled back at 1:29. Lo and behold, I was like, okay, that's okay. So the first time it was in the middle of, the days were still long enough, I could try and back. And fine, and then this happened, like schedule another meeting at 1 o'clock, where she knows that I had to go. Like all this other time when there was no Shabbat, like there was no meetings for like 6 months, and all of a sudden now they're happening every week. And I was like, okay, there's a problem here. So schedule one meeting, you want to live. Fine, I went. And obviously things started breaking down. She had to do it in a backhanded way, but anyone knows when someone is dafka against you, and you can see it. And so eventually I ended up somewhere working for Sutton, because half the company got bought over, so I was working in Sutton. And to travel there if anyone ever uses TfL, is a miracle. Because you have to take the bus, you have to take the underground, you have to take the overground train, you have to take a tram, and you have to take another bus on the way there. So if anyone is striking, you are done. You're not getting to work that day. If the buses are striking, if the trains, if anyone is striking, you're done. And so on some days it used to take hours just to get back. But Baruch Hashem, I was grateful for the job. And I started to see more the cloud started to go. And Baruch Hashem, I eventually found a job with a Jewish place. And I remember it was during Sukkot time. It was one of the finishing the signatures of the Klalot and Kitavo was, you will be cursed when you go in, and you'll be cursed when you come in. That was the signature. And everything, whatever we tried to do, wasn't working out. And we knew that this was what it was. And then eventually we started to say, okay, I've got a job now, Baruch Hashem, the allergy. Some people did call me crazy, but so the allergy is amazing. And you're like, fine, so first Shabbat there. I was like, you know what, I've been allergic for 10 years. And these amazing chalot just sitting there, looking at me. I was like, you know what, I've been allergic to this for 10 years. If I'm going to go out anyway, it's going to be on Shabbat. It's going to be challah. So I took the challah, bit into it, finished the whole thing. Never had allergies since. So these I knew. These were the challah which I got a no one could take them away because no one gave them to me. So I started, and then Baruch Hashem started with the Jewish firm. Baruch Hashem, amazing people. Then there was one time during Sukkot, and looking around at my life, I always remember the Mashal that David Amelech used to have in a special room remind himself of who he was, of where he came from. And so I've always reminded myself of everything I've come from. No matter how bad things are, I remind myself, we've had it worse. Where Hashem brought us up from, and I know things will get better. And so it was once that God was sitting up on the roof, and there was this one Hasidic poster, and written there on the bottom is Baruch Ata Elohecha, Baruch Ata B'tzedekah. Final climate. Final one. That's how we knew. So coming here to Father of Israel before Matan Torah, it's not just sound, it's not sound, it's not. What we have here defies description, defies reality. Thank you very much.
Yeah, just one word. You know, the Kohen Gadol of Motzei Kippur used to take the Sefer Torah and used to tell the Jewish people, all what I've read you now is only a small fraction of what's really written. These three neshamot have much more to tell us about their lives than what they've actually told us. And the mamash went through the test of root. So let there be a chizuk for us that we should have a Kabbalat Torah b'simcha. Rabbi Hanan ben Akashia אומר, רצה הקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות ישראל